The first thing everyone noticed wasn't the silence. It was the CEO's hands. He stood perfectly calm in the middle of a crowded electronics store, smiling politely at a customer while his fingers moved in quick, deliberate motions. To most people, it looked like casual hand gestures. But one man across the store froze the moment he saw them. "Help me. He has a weapon." Those 6 silent words changed everything. Mark Dawson wasn't supposed to be shopping that afternoon. The 38-year-old single father had only stopped by to replace the cracked headphones his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, needed for online summer classes. Money was tight, so he had already spent 20 minutes comparing clearance prices before finally picking the cheapest pair. Life hadn't been easy since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Every day felt like balancing on a thin wire. He worked nights as a warehouse supervisor, slept a few hours each morning, packed Lily's lunch, helped with homework, paid bills that never seemed to get smaller, and somehow still tried to be both parents at once. There wasn't room for mistakes. Mark had learned American Sign Language years ago because Lily had been born with moderate hearing loss. Although surgery improved her hearing, signing had become their family's second language. Even now, they still signed across noisy rooms, or when words felt too heavy. So when he looked up from the discount shelf and saw the CEO's hands moving, he understood every single word. His stomach dropped. The man standing beside the CEO looked completely ordinary. Mid-40s, baseball cap, jeans, one hand resting casually inside his jacket pocket. But now Mark knew why. The stranger wasn't shopping. He was threatening the CEO. Mark looked around. Nobody else had noticed. Employees continued stocking shelves. Families compared televisions. A little boy begged his mother for a video game. Life continued, as if nothing was wrong. The CEO kept smiling naturally, asking fake questions about laptops while secretly signing another sentence. "Stay calm. Call police quietly." Mark slowly reached into his pocket, pretending to check his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He dialed 911 without taking his eyes off the scene. Speaking softly, he explained exactly what he'd seen. The dispatcher asked how he knew. "He signed it," Mark whispered. "I'm fluent in ASL." The dispatcher immediately told him officers were already being sent. "Do not approach." Simple advice, almost impossible to follow because the armed man suddenly grabbed the CEO by the shoulder. Not violently, just enough to remind him who was in control. The CEO laughed as though the stranger had told a funny joke. Anyone watching would assume they were old friends. Only Mark knew the truth. Minutes earlier, billionaire technology executive Daniel Brooks had entered the store quietly, hoping to browse without immediate attention. He hated security details and often visited stores alone to see how customers were treated. Unfortunately, someone recognized him. The stranger wasn't random. He had been fired from one of Brooks's manufacturing plants 8 months earlier after threatening coworkers. Since then, he'd blamed the CEO personally for losing everything. Now he wanted revenge. The weapon hidden inside his jacket wasn't just for intimidation. He intended to force Brooks outside to a waiting vehicle. Mark's heart pounded harder. The police weren't there yet. Every second felt longer than the last. Then, something unexpected happened. Daniel Brooks looked directly at Mark. Their eyes met without changing his smile. Brooks signed another message. "Keep everyone away." Mark swallowed hard. How was he supposed to do that without creating panic? Then inspiration struck. He walked over to a nearby employee. "Excuse me," he said loudly enough for shoppers nearby to hear. "I think there is water leaking near the back entrance." Somebody almost slipped. Within seconds, employees began checking the area. Customers naturally drifted away from that section of the store. Without realizing it, Mark had quietly created empty space around the CEO and the armed man. Exactly what Brooks needed. The stranger noticed nothing. He remained focused on his hostage. Outside, police cars rolled silently into the parking lot without activating sirens. Officers surrounded the building, but they couldn't rush inside. One wrong move could trigger violence. Inside, Brooks continued asking fake questions about computer monitors while secretly signing short updates toward Mark. Whenever the gunman wasn't looking. He is nervous. He wants my car. He has not seen police. Mark relayed every detail to the dispatcher. The information allowed officers to build a precise plan in real time. Then, everything nearly fell apart. A young employee walked directly toward the two men carrying a stack of tablets. The gunman became startled. His hand tightened inside the jacket. Brooks instantly stepped sideways, blocking the employee's path, while pretending to examine another display. "Sorry," he laughed. "We're in your way." The employee smiled awkwardly and walked around them. Disaster avoided, barely. The gunman whispered something harshly. Brooks nodded obediently. Then he signed one final message toward Mark. "He is moving now." The stranger started guiding Brooks toward the exit. The distance wasn't far, maybe 30 feet. But once outside, everything would become infinitely more dangerous. Mark knew there wasn't enough time. Without thinking, he grabbed a shopping cart and accidentally, on purpose, crashed it into a promotional display. Boxes exploded across the floor. The loud crash echoed through the entire store. Everyone turned instinctively, including the gunman. For one crucial second, his attention shifted away from Brooks. That was all police needed. Officers burst through the entrance. "Police, don't move." Chaos erupted. The gunman reached for his weapon. Two officers tackled him before he could fully draw it. Within moments, he was handcuffed on the floor. Customers screamed. Children cried. Employees stood frozen. Then silence slowly returned. Brooks sat down heavily in a nearby chair. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared. His hands trembled. The adrenaline had finally caught up with him. An officer approached Mark. If you hadn't understood those signs, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Later that evening, after giving statements at the police station, Mark quietly drove home. He assumed life would simply continue. Warehouse shifts, bills, packing lunches, nothing more. 3 days later, his phone rang during breakfast. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, Mr. Dawson. "Yes, this is Daniel Brooks." Mark nearly dropped his coffee. The CEO thanked him again before asking if they could meet for lunch. Mark almost declined. He didn't own nice clothes. He couldn't afford expensive restaurants, but Brooks insisted. They met at a small neighborhood diner instead of a luxury steakhouse. Brooks explained why. "My mother raised 3 kids alone. Places like this remind me where I came from." For nearly 2 hours they talked, not about the incident, about parenting, grief, working endless hours, trying to be enough for children who deserved everything. At one point, Brooks asked, "What would make the biggest difference in your life right now?" Mark laughed. "Honestly, more hours in the day." Then he admitted the truth. He'd always dreamed of working in logistics management instead of warehouse labor, but never finished college because life got in the way. Brooks listened carefully. 2 weeks later, Mark received another call. Not charity, not a handout. A job interview. Brooks believed someone who could stay calm under unimaginable pressure, think creatively, communicate clearly, and protect complete strangers possessed leadership skills that couldn't be taught in classrooms. The interview process was real, competitive. Mark still had to earn it. He studied every night after Lily went to bed. He practiced interview questions. He doubted himself constantly. There were candidates with better resumes, better degrees, and years of corporate experience. For a while, it looked like he wouldn't get the position. Then the hiring committee reviewed surveillance footage from the store. They watched Mark solve problem after problem, without panic, creating space, communicating with emergency services, distracting the suspect, protecting innocent shoppers, everything, while risking his own safety. The committee reached a unanimous decision. 6 months later, Mark walked into the company headquarters as the newest operations manager. His salary nearly doubled. For the first time since losing his wife, he wasn't choosing between groceries and utility bills. Lily finally got the laptop she'd been saving for. They moved into a safer apartment. Weekends stopped, revolving around overtime shifts, One afternoon, months after everything had settled down, Lily visited the company office. As she waited in the lobby, Daniel Brooks walked by. Without saying a word, he smiled and signed to her. "Your dad is extraordinary," Lily smiled back before signing. "I know." She'd known long before anyone else did. Sometimes the qualities that change your life aren't the loudest ones. They don't arrive with applause or perfect timing. They show up quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, hidden inside skills you almost forgot you had. And every now and then, the one thing you learned simply to help someone you love becomes the very thing that saves a life and opens a future you never imagined possible.